The last time we were talking about the time value of money, and the bottom line was ultimately to save enough for. I mean, most people don't save for homes now because they might save for a down payment, they might save for a down payment on a car, but most people don't save for a car and pay it in cash. Some people do pay for a car in cash, but they're usually people who have enough money that they probably don't make a conscious effort to save. Uh, Really, the only thing that we might save for is our kids' college. Uh, I guess theoretically for a wedding, but I don't know about that. Shouldn't spend that much money on a wedding. And then retirement. Retirement's the most likely thing to be saving for. And what we saw was that if you start saving early, that by taking advantage of the effect of compounding, whether that's in through the stock market or other way of investing money, you can make a reasonable amount of money become a big enough amount of money that it becomes somewhat impressive. So we just looked at a couple of stocks, I think, at the end of class, just to show you how they change throughout time. And I looked up online to see what the data was here. So my question what is the average return of the S&P 500? And it says the average annualized total return for the S&P 500 index over the past 90 years is 9.8%. So about 10%. And I think when they talk about annualized means that it's kind of you get the dividends quarterly. And so it's a combination of dividends and stock price. So if you reinvest the dividends, just like you would reinvest the money if you were putting it into CD, the money you get in interest, you put that towards the balance, which then gives you an additional amount. So I was going to mention a few things related to this that are not in the book. So we'll just move to here, and we'll insert a page. So one thing I was going to talk about was, I guess one thing is Social Security. So let's say you retire and you want to know, where's your money coming from? I mean, most people can count on right now Social Security. So you know that they take out, what is it, 7.25% maybe, somewhere around 7%. So they take out of your paycheck about 7.25 to 7.5%. I guess I can look that up online. So I'll give you the exact answer. What is the percentage taken out for Social Security? There we go. Depends. Okay. So it's only 6.2%. I didn't know. I thought it was more than that. Okay, maybe that includes Medicare. So you take out 6.2% out of your salary, and that's out of your part of the check. The company takes out an equal amount. So this is you, and 6.2% is company. Now, if you're self-employed, you have to do the total amount. You have to pay that amount. So this goes into basically like a savings account to some extent. It's not, they're not investing your Social Security money in the stock market. So the returns on the money that they invest from your Social Security is not going to be as high. But they're still investing. You're still putting about 12% of your salary into that, which is a pretty big proportion. Again, you only pay half of that if you're working for somebody else. So Social Security is one way, and that's where the money comes from, is you pay it, and your employer pays it every time you get a paycheck. Another one is you could keep working, okay? Keep working. So some people choose to work part-time or full-time. One is if you have a pension. So pension is kind of like Social Security in that somebody puts some money away into an account. And so usually, well, actually only about 15%, I think, right now. 15% of workers have a fixed benefit pension. And Social Security is like a pension. It's a fixed amount. The advantage of a Social Security is that it is adjusted, the amount is adjusted according to inflation. Sometimes pensions are not adjusted to inflation. So what you get paid when you're 65 and you retire is the same you'll get paid at 100. But the problem there, of course, is that inflation is going to make that amount of money buy less. So you have to, that's one thing you have to take into account. Now, it used to be a much larger percentage than 15%. Now, I'm not an expert on pensions and the history of pensions, but what I've heard is that pensions for companies came into existence around World War II. And I think it was because they had they froze wages to reduce inflation. And as a consequence, if you can't increase the wages, but you're trying to attract workers, you offer them some other benefits, which one of the benefits was a pension program. And normally, back in the original days, the company would put the money. They wouldn't ask the employee to contribute to the pension plan. The company would contribute money to a pension plan. So it would go to a depending upon the situation, they would have somebody invest that money, and they would invest in something probably that's a better return than the people who invest Social Security money. But as we showed the other day, over the long run, we just talked about it today, about 10%, you get about a 10% return if you invest in the stock market. So they would take that money, they would put enough money aside for each worker, and they would assume that the money they would put aside would return a certain return on investment, and they would have somebody figure out what the average lifespan of the worker was, and they would do the calculations. It's all math, and they would figure out, basically how much money do we have to put into the account so that these people, when they get their pension, that they're all going to get the amount they were promised. So you'd promise the worker a certain pension, and usually it was a function. So pensions and Social Security as well. So we'll say the pension is a function, meaning the amount of years of service. That means how many years you worked for the company. And usually it was an average of the final 3 years, maybe 3 to 5 years salary. So it's some, you usually take the number of years of service times the average salary over the last couple of years, and then multiply by some factor, and that would be the amount you would get. Now, I have a pension from Westvaco. I worked there for 21 years. So my pension is based on working there 21 years and my salary for the last 3 years there. So I know exactly how much I'm going to get and depending upon when you take the pension, you get, if you wait longer to take your pension, then you get more per month. Sometimes normally you can retire early at 62 and you get a reduced amount, or you could retire at 65, which is your standard retirement age for a pension, or you can actually wait. I don't know, actually I'm not sure if it helps to wait for my pension. but it's going to be on the order of what my Social Security is as far as the amount. If I worked there till I was 65, I'd have a higher pension because I'd have more years of service, and I'd have probably a higher salary if I continued to work there. Yes. Not necessarily. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 401ks here in a second. Now now I work for the state of Virginia as a teacher, and there is a pension plan. It's called the Virginia Retirement System, and they do the same thing. They have a formula based on the last 3 years, I think, of your employment with them, the number of years. For a state pension, it's interesting because after 30 years of working for the state, you can retire and obtain your full pension. So if I started at 20 and worked to 50, I could retire at 50 and get the same pension as if I started at 35 and worked to 65. It's the same number of years. My private pension through Westvaco, there's no early, I couldn't retire before 62 and get any kind of money. So each pension is different. And again, what they do is they have a manager of the pension, and they invest the money in stocks and bonds, and they use historical information to predict what their rate of return is. Now, if the rate of return that they predicted is higher than what actually happens, then you can run into a problem where they say the pensions are underfunded. The amount of money they have saved in this pension fund is not enough to actually pay the full amount of the pensions that they promised based on their initial projections. So there are a lot of pension funds that are underfunded. And a lot of it also depends on how the stock market is doing. So 2009, after the stock market went down considerably, there were some pensions that were probably underfunded. Now, with the stock market going back up, they're probably okay. And and so one of the reasons that companies are not doing pensions anymore is because they're somewhat responsible for. They've made somewhat of a commitment to their workers saying you're going to get this pension, and if they don't put enough money into the pension fund, then they're supposed to refund, add more money to the pension fund to make it funded, have enough money in there. But of course, that's money taken away from profits and all these other things, and they don't like that. So the newer pensions are not what we would call fixed benefit pensions. They are defined contribution pensions. So that's what a 401k is. So it is kind of like a pension, but it's not exactly like a pension. Okay, so that's Social Security. You could keep working. You might have a traditional pension. Another option is a fixed. So we'll call this a defined benefit. That means you're defined how much you get with your pension. There's also what's called a fixed or defined contribution pension. So what they do there is you put some money in typically, and the company matches a certain amount of money. So first thing is different is that here, most of the time, the individual is putting some of their own money in there. Here, nowadays, they're like the VRS system. I do have to put money in. Okay, so the state puts some money into the pension. I put some money into the pension. It's still a defined benefit pension. I know how much I'm going to get. And it doesn't matter how long I live, I still get this. So what they're doing, the people who die before the age that they work these calculations out, they get less money, but they're not here anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? And if you live longer, you still get money out of the pension, so you have a guaranteed source of income. And that's the same with Social Security. You get that until you die. You don't just get it till you're 80 and then they stop giving it to you. Okay. Now, with these fixed or defined contribution, what they do is you put a fixed amount in. So, for example, I might say, let's say the worker, he contributes 5% to this fixed defined contribution pension, and say the company, they match that, so they put 5% in. So together, about 10% of your salary goes into this. So typically what you'll do is you'll invest it, but you may not do the investing yourself. You'll have the company help you do this. Okay, so there's some kind of there's usually an outside company that gives you various options to put the money into. I mean, you could probably put it into a money market account, which wouldn't give you anything, or you could put it into one company's stock. They don't usually want you to do that. You can put it into mutual funds, which are a grouping of different kinds of stock to diversify your portfolio, meaning the companies you are choosing to invest in. And the kind of investment you choose is going to have a certain return on your investment every year. And over a long period of time, if you keep contributing to this pension, you'll have a certain amount of money. So let's say at 65 years, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I have, say, $500,000. Okay. So now one thing is that these are usually what we call tax deferred. Tax deferred means that the money I put into these accounts, for like example, a 401k, the money that you put into a 401k, you don't pay tax on that when you make the contribution. Now, so the interest you make on the 401 on that principal until you retire, till you take it out, also doesn't get interest. I mean, doesn't get taxes applied to it. But when you take the money out, they do then take taxes out for it. So you ultimately it's not tax free, it's tax deferred. You ultimately pay taxes, but I can show you. I'll probably show you another day. But you can show how the difference between not having a tax deferred option versus having a tax deferred option. And you do ultimately accumulate more money in the long run if you have tax deferred options. So it's a good thing. You're still going to pay half. You're still going to have to pay tax at some point.
You accumulate more money, but do you end up paying more in taxes?
Well, ultimately because you made more money, but you even after taxes you get more money. So the net amount with a tax deferred situation is more. You'll net more money. Okay, and there's really three main kinds. There's a 401k. There's a traditional IRA, which stands for individual retirement account, and there's what's called a Roth IRA. These are very similar to each other. These are tax deferred initially. Okay, I think that's spelled wrong, but you don't pay tax on the amount that you contribute, so that lowers your tax burden for a particular year. When you do take the money out, you have to take it out after 59 and a half years old, which I can now take my money out of there if I want to. So you have an age where you have to keep it into. So you should plan on leaving it in there. Don't use it. There are some circumstances, but for the most part, you should plan to keep it in there till you're 59 and a half years old. Now, a Roth IRA, what you do there is you pay tax initially, but the interest, which would be the return, is no tax. Okay, so you don't pay tax on the interest. Here you get the interest, and you pay tax on the interest after you take it out, but not while you're building it. Here, because you're not deferring the tax, you have to pay tax on it initially. So you take the tax hit now, and you don't have the tax hit later. Now, it turns out that the only difference between these two, and I can show you on a spreadsheet to do the math, and I've read it, that's true, is depending upon which tax bracket you think you're going to be in when you retire. Do I think I'm going to be making in a higher tax bracket, which means I'm making more money when I retire than when I was working, or the other way around? If you think you're going to make more when you retire than when you were working, then a Roth IRA makes sense. If you think you're going to be making less money when you retire, then a 401k or a traditional IRA makes sense. There's not a huge amount of difference between them as far as the final shakeout. But anyway, so that's basically saving money, and you could just save money with it. You could just have savings. This is something that's not tax deferred. You could get it any time in your life. It's just some money you have in a bank account somewhere that you're trying to get some. Or you could savings could be CDs. They could be stocks as well. They could be bonds. They're in basically any kind of investment that you're not tax deferred. So we could say non-tax deferred savings. I mean, you could sell your house. If you wanted to move to a smaller house, that would be another way of getting some money. That would go into your pot here of savings. And ultimately, what you want to do is you want to have from all these different sources, Social Security, if you have a pension, if you saved money through your employer using a 401k or done it yourself using a traditional IRA or Roth IRA, or just saved money in general, all of these pots come together and give you your assets when you retire, and then you start taking money out. And, so then you have to decide. So one thing you have to kind of think about is, the standard of living you think you need when you retire. If you want to maintain 2 houses and a boat and vacations to Hawaii every year versus somebody who has one house that's a small house and they keep their car for 20 years, and you can have a large impact on how much you need. And ultimately, there are various scenarios. One is you spend all your money and don't leave anything to your children, or you spend so much you end up getting to a point where you don't have enough to live on, and you're a poor retired person. So this the ideal situation is that you don't spend a lot, and you're happy, and you leave some money to your kids so they don't have to worry about it as much. So hopefully that's the situation I have. Okay, so those are different things. Anybody have any questions about anything I've mentioned? The bottom line is, if you could find a job with a fixed benefit pension, that would be great. The next thing is when you do have a company, a business, if they have some kind of 401k program where they match a certain percentage of your income. I mean, you can contribute more than 5%, but they always recommend that you at least put as much money in as the company matches, because that pretty much, they always say that's free money. And I guess it is, because you just, they're giving it to you. You just have to wait till you're 59 and a half to use it. But I think you can, there's a certain, I don't think it's a certain percentage, but maybe a certain dollar amount. It's either their dollar amount or it's a percentage. So I remember before I left Westvaco, I think I was putting about 15% of my money into a 401k program, and the company was matching maybe 5% of it. So I was putting 20% of my income. My daughter works for Inova Hospital up in Northern Virginia, And she doesn't really like her job that much. I mean, she used to be occupational therapist, which she can still do, but this job's a little more flexible, and it's actually doing kind of like hospital auditing, so checking out patients' billing and make sure they're billed right and making sure the doctors are charging the right amount. And she's saying to me, she said, I'd like to find another job, but the benefits are great. A lot of times you take a job just for the benefits. They have good health insurance, and they also have a 401k plan. And so she's being smart about that. She's contemplating other things, but benefits can make a big influence on your employment decisions. Okay, so we'll go to the next section. I remember somebody saying on my review, it doesn't happen very often, but some people don't like me mentioning those kind of things. I don't know if they think I'm trying to sell something, which I'm not. Anything that I will tell you relative to financial stuff is about as mainstream as you can get. Okay, so anything I say, 99% of any financial advisors would say the same thing. Okay. And you got to be careful about financial advisors. I don't trust. There is actually supposed to be a rule. I don't know if they've actually rescinded it, where there was supposed to be some rule that people who represented your financial interests, had only your interests in mind, not their personal benefits. So they wouldn't sell you something that was good for them but not good for you. And of course, the Trump administration wants to get rid of that. Seems like a reasonable thing to do, that you should trust people, but it's like, oh, my brother-in-law's got this great stock tip, or maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Okay, so that's savings. So the next thing we're going to talk about is credit, and the main two things that I'm going to talk about are installment loans, which is car loans, house loans. Pretty much most loans these days. You should probably stay away from things that are not installment loans, because they're probably trying to get something, make it sound better than it really is. And the second thing is credit cards. So you're borrowing money now, so you don't have to save it and wait. You can have the pleasure of having your car now instead of saving up for 4 years for the car. And they talk about something called, I forget what the exact, I've probably got it written down here. Yeah, add-on loans. Nobody does add-on loans, so I'm not going to talk about it. I've decided I'm rebelling. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about that. So I'm going to talk about installment loans. So probably your first experience with installment loans will be buying a car. Your second one, your biggest one, will be buying a house. So basically what you have is you have a certain amount of money. So we'll say, what will we call it? We'll call it the purchase price, okay, of something. And I'm going to use a car because it's easy. You can relate to a car. So let's say the purchase price of anything is given. Let's say it's a $20,000 car. First thing is they may require a down payment, or they may want a down payment. Okay, so we're going to put down payment. Why do they want a down payment? I guess they figure if you're responsible enough to save up some money, you're probably responsible enough to make the payments. So it's kind of I would think some way of evaluating your credit worthiness. Another thing they do is they look at your credit report. We'll talk about that as well, but let's not worry about that right now. So let's say either you decide to pay $22,000 down, or they decide you have to pay $2,000 line. So the difference between those two is the amount that you've got to take a loan out on. So that's going to be $18,000. Now, so why would they want you to put a down payment? Just to, besides demonstrating that you might be good at paying off the bills. One is because if you default on your car loan, they're going to keep your down payment. So when you buy the car and you drive it out off the lot, they usually say it already drops a certain amount. It depreciates once you just leave the showroom. And so if they repossess that car, say you didn't make the first payment, they repossess the car, it's already lost some of its value. So hopefully the down payment from their perspective would be enough to cover that, so they could sell the car for $18,000 and recoup the amount that was still outstanding to pay. Okay, so then you've got the loan amount. The things that go into determining, and ultimately is what we're trying to do is determine the monthly payment and it's going to be a function of three things. I think three things. It's going to be the function of the loan amount. Yeah, three things. The loan amount, the number of payments, or how long you want the loan to be, and the interest rate. And this is a yearly interest rate. Okay, so ultimately, what will happen is you'll have some monthly payment which paid every month after the term of the loan, which is the number of payments, will result in a balance of $0. And you pay the car off, and then you get your title, and then it's really your car. The interest rate depends on a lot of things. It depends on what the Federal Reserve is setting the prime rate to be, and that influences the rates that banks can charge. It also depends upon your credit worthiness. If you don't have any credit history, they're going to charge you a higher interest rate because you're more of a risk. So just like there are risk and rewards for savings, there are risk and rewards for loans. And if you are more of a risky person that you're loaning to, then you want the person who's lending you wants a higher rate of return. So on average, they still make money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the first few lines of an installment payment, and I'm going to make up the loan amount. Ultimately, it's calculated so that after the 72nd payment or the 60th payment, that the balance is $0. But the actual mechanics of going from one month to the next is the same. So let's make it about this big, and we need a one for like the month, the principal, the interest, the payment, the amount beyond that. Okay, I think that's enough columns. Hopefully it is. So we're going to make a table which kind of looks like a spreadsheet, and that's, if you remember, if you were looking at the videos, it says car payment example or car payment problem. You'll do one of these using Excel. So let's use what we have, $18,000. We'll use an interest rate of 6%, which is 0.06, and we'll make it 60 months. In this case, the 60 months really doesn't come into effect because I don't know what well, actually what I'll do is I'll go online, I'll figure out what the payment should be, and then we'll use that to demonstrate this. So we'll say payment calculator. Okay. So here's the amount. Loan is $18,000, and you're like, what they're doing is they're doing it for a house, but this still works. Okay. We'll do it for 5 years, which is 60 months, not 45 years, 5 years, and the interest rate is 6%. So we calculate it, and it said the monthly payment is $347.99. Okay, so $349.99. So payment $349.99. Now, if I did this for 60 times, which I'm not going to do, we'd end up with a zero balance. So let's put the month here. We'll put the balance here. We'll do the interest. We'll do the payment, which doesn't change. And let me put this on one page so you can see a little better. So you got payment, and I'm going to put this extra column called excess. You'll see what that means in a minute. So we're going to start with month 0, 1, 2. So we're going to start out with an $18,000 balance. And the interest I'm going to put right here. Okay, not right there, because we don't pay interest the second we buy the car. We buy the car, we go through a month, and then we make our first payment. So the interest, just like before, is just going to be equal to the interest rate times the balance. I'll just use capital B for that. And the interest rate we use is not the yearly interest rate, but it's the monthly interest rate. So we're going to take the yearly interest rate, we're going to divide by 12, which gives us a monthly interest rate. We're going to multiply by $18,000. And we get my calculator out. Whoops. I forgot that was connected to the headphones, so hopefully that didn't. Oh, I disconnected the computer. Okay. So let me put that back up there. And hopefully my headphone's still working. Let me just check here. Well, yep, it's still working. Good. I didn't destroy it. So if we do that calculation, we've got 0.06 divided by 12 times 18,000. So it's $90. Now our payment is $349.99. So what we do is we're paying more than the interest, and we get credit for that. Okay, if you don't get credit for it, don't do the loan. So if you take $349.99, you subtract $90, you'll get $259.99. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to calculate a new balance. Hey, that sounds like a good name for a shoe store. So you get a new balance, and that's going to be your old balance minus your excess payment. So let's subtract that from 18,000, and we'll get $17,740.01. Okay, so that goes here, $17,740.01. So the advantage here is the excess amount we pay, we get credit for, and that's going to lower the balance. So not only do we have a lower balance, but we're going to pay less interest because we don't have as much money to owe. So the next step, we do the same thing. So the next month, we calculate the interest. It's going to be not $18,000, but it's going to be $17,740.01. And we multiply by the interest rate divided by 12 to get our monthly interest rate. And our numbers are going to be slightly different than 90. So it'll be 17,740.01 times 0.06 divided by 12. And our interest is $88.70. But our payment stays the same. So the excess that we're paying more than the interest is going to be $261.29. So that's this. So I forgot to write down the interest answer here. It's $88.70. This one was $90. Forgot to write that down too. Okay, so those are my interests. And then my balance is going to be my new balance after 2 months is going to be my old balance after 1 month, and subtracting the excess amount that I pay. And so let's do that. Plus 17,740.01. And I get a new balance, which is $17,478.72. So 17478.72. So I'll write that down. It's 17,478.72. Okay, and you just keep repeating that. And I'm going to show you what happens when you keep repeating that. So here it actually shows you. So this is what's called an amortization schedule. It basically shows you what your balance is. So this is the first month. There's your interest. There's your principal. If you take the difference between, well, if you take your payment, which is the $349.99. So what they're calling here is principal. Is the amount is my excess. I called it excess. They call it principal. So you subtract your principal from your balance, and that gives you your new balance. And then you do it again. So you can see my numbers match up exactly. 80. Well, or do they 88.70? I don't know why they got 88.71, but anyway, they did. Maybe I rounded the wrong direction. And so what you'll see is as you go along, the balance gets lower, the interest gets lower, the payment gets higher because the sum of these two always equals the payment. And after 60 months, you end up with a zero balance and you're done. So you pay more interest at the beginning and less at the end. So it's giving you credit for making those payments. And the same thing applies for a mortgage, so you can do the same thing. So let me just show you. If I did a mortgage, let's say I had a $200,000 house, and I wanted to do it for 15 years at 5%, calculate. Your monthly payment is $1,581.59. You make a total of 180 payments, and so for your $200,000 loan, you're paying ultimately $284,000. Of that, of course, is the $84,000 is the interest. And the amortization schedule, they show you here, in terms of yearly, because 15 times 12 is a big number, but we can show it. But again, by the time you get to the end of your loan, you have a zero balance and you own the home, and let's click the monthly schedule. So it's it's a lot of months. So again, after 180 payments, you have $0. Anybody have any questions about how that works? I mean, you personally don't have to figure it out, but at least you can know before you go in to buy a car. If you know about how much it is, you can figure out yourself what your monthly payment is. One thing you'll find out is a lot of times you go into a car dealership, and what they say is, well, what can you afford? What monthly payment can you afford? That's probably not the best way to do it. Best thing to do is to go online, figure out how much a car that you want is going to cost, figure out what the monthly payment is, and as you increase the length of the loan, your monthly payment goes down, but you end up paying more in interest. So it's kind of a balancing act. Which one you choose. So rather than showing you a spreadsheet doing this all again, we'll wait till next time. We're not quitting, so I'm just saying we're going to wait till next time. We're going to talk about something different. That's credit cards, so we'll talk about credit cards.
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, when they tell you that you can refinance after a year to get like a better interest rate,
Yes.
does that knock your entire payment down, or does that just knock down the interest that you pay so that you're paying more towards the principal?
Um, well, you probably could do either one. I mean, if you kept the same. So the question is, if after a year they come to you, and they may do that because if you paid a year's worth of payments, somebody's probably going to think, oh, you're actually a pretty good credit risk, so we'll offer you a lower interest rate. And so they'll some bank, probably not the one you're borrowing from because they're already got they've already got the higher interest rate. Say somebody comes to you and says, hey, we can refinance your car at 5% instead of 6%. So you'll have the balance. So it won't be the original loan amount. It'll be whatever the balance is at that point. And then, so there's two options that you could do. You could keep the same payment and pay off earlier, which ultimately would lower the amount that you pay in interest. Or you could have this, say if you have a 6-year loan and you've gone a year into the loan, you have 5 years left, you could do a 5-year loan and that would lower your monthly payment. Ultimately, you would, in that scenario, you would end up paying more interest because you'd be paying over 6 years instead of 5 years instead of 6. Yeah. So you have to pay. So yeah, you could do either one. You could you could have a same payment and pay it off more quickly, or you could have a lower payment and pay it off in the same amount of time. For cars, they don't usually, it's usually just the loan amount. If you're doing a house, so you can refinance a house loan as well, usually there's some other fees that you have to pay besides. So when you refinance it, you have to pay some money up front, and ultimately that money that you pay up front should be less than the amount that you save by paying less interest over the long run. So it's not quite as simple when it comes to a home loan. Okay. So credit cards. So what you're doing there is you're basically taking out a loan from your credit card company, whoever that is. And the difference between one thing about a credit card versus a regular loan is that you can use a credit card and never pay any interest on it. So the rules is if you make a charge and then you get to the end of the month, so you have all your monthly charges, if you pay that amount off before the payment date, which is usually about a month later, then you pay no interest on it. So that's good. You're like, well, why would anybody, credit card company, want to do that for you? Because they're lending you money for a month or two, but they're not getting anything for it. Well, what credit card company, they charge a fee to the business, and that fee is enough. I mean, I guess if you're a good credit risk, you pay your card off every month. They don't have to worry about any other costs associated with you, so they're going to get 4% or whatever the amount is for your purchase, based on from the what's the word? The seller, or the merchant. I guess that's the right word. The merchant. Now, if you get to the end of that first month and you have a balance, and then you don't pay off the total amount by the payment date, then they'll start charging you interest on the account. And that how they calculate that interest is based on a kind of like a rolling balance of your credit card. And so we'll go through an example of how that calculation happens. You probably won't worry about that. The ideal case is don't ever always pay your credit card off before the balance is due. So just use it as a way of paying for things without cash. It's kind of like you would do with a debit card. The advantage of using a credit card, of course, is you do delay paying for it a little bit. Um, here's my personal experience. I used to use my debit card more, but if there are fraudulent charges on your credit card, they're usually protected, so you don't have to pay for them. Somebody gets your credit card number somehow or another. A debit card, depending upon how much, I don't think it's quite as protected. If somebody gets your debit card and charges stuff to it, then that you may be liable for that amount, depending upon how it happens, I think. So I've switched to doing mostly credit card stuff instead of debit cards. The only thing I do debit cards for is to get cash from the cash machine and from it's kind of strange. So when I buy food from Aldi's, okay, you're like, why do you do that? It used to be that Aldi's, has anybody ever used Aldi's? Yeah, so you can get good prices there, okay, but they're different because they're smaller and they don't have as much choice, and but I buy my coffee there, I buy my chocolate there, what else do I buy there? The important things in life, coffee and chocolate. Cheese, they have some good prices on cheese. We don't have one in Covington, so I buy my cereal, my breakfast cereal from Aldi's, okay. And it used to be that they didn't allow you to use credit cards. And in Europe, they still don't allow you to use credit cards because that's an extra cost to them. So they're doing everything to reduce the costs. So they didn't used to do credit cards. But in the U.S., credit cards are so much more prevalent. Also, we don't have a PIN system on our credit card, on our debit card. Well, we do have on debit cards. Anyway, so when I first started shopping at Aldi's, it was debit cards only. And then I thought, well, these guys are trying to save me money, so I'm going to continue to use my debit card to give them a benefit. I'm supporting their efforts at keeping the cost down. So that's the only people. Yeah, that's it. Get cash. Sometimes when I go to the grocery store, I'll get cash at Food Line or whatever. So the best thing. But anyway, let's just look at an example here. So we talked about that kind of stuff. We'll come back to talk about that problem. Okay. So this is it's kind of like a spreadsheet that, and I just follow along. You'll have one you have to do for homework. I am recording the class today for a few students. Said they asked me if I would. But I'm just going to describe the way it works. So you start off, say you don't pay the full balance, and you've got a balance now. So you start off the month with a balance. And then you have transactions during the month, which increase the balance. Or you might have transactions that decrease the balance, like refunds or credits or payments. So what I have here is my balance. So this is my starting balance. Then I have a transaction, and so I charge $14.92 to my card. So that increases my balance by that amount. Now, for the first 4 days of the month, I have this balance. So I'm going to charge, what you come up with is basically a daily interest rate. And so they're going to charge you a daily interest rate instead of a monthly interest rate on this balance for 4 days. Then when you make this charge, the balance increases, and that balance stays the same until you have your next transaction, which is 2 days later. They're going to charge you the daily interest rate on this balance for 2 days. Then you have another transaction. Here it's a credit, so it decreases the balance. That balance stays in effect for 4 days, so you pay the daily interest rate, which is the same all the time. And so when you get to the end of the month, there will be an interest charge. And it's not based upon the balance at the beginning of the month or the end of the month. It's based upon how your balance changes throughout the month. And so ultimately that then is added to your balance. So you have your transactions, which, if you buy something, it increases the balance. If you make a payment, it reduces the balance. I think one of these was a payment, so that reduces. These are probably credits. This is probably a payment. And so based on, you can think of it as, sometimes they say the monthly average balance, or you can base it upon the balance using, and because it's all computerized, it's really what they do. I think they just look at each day, and they look through the 30 days in the month and see what your balance is for that day, and they'll charge you the interest on that balance that day. So that's the gist of it. So I don't think there's anything. I'm going to erase this from my recording and don't write any numbers down, but I'm going to show you my credit card credit score. So there are a few companies that take financial information, things like, if you make car payments, that goes to a credit, Equifax or Experian, and what's the other? I don't know what the other one is. But they'll take financial information that is apparently available. It's probably not publicly available, but it's privately available. And they're going to evaluate how weak or strong a credit risk you are, so that if somebody's lending you money for a car payment, they're going to, the interest rate that you get is dependent upon your credit worthiness, and they'll use the credit score for that. So one thing is payment history. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, right? If you've never had any payments, how do you have a payment history? So, but you're trying to get a credit card or some kind of loan that involves payments. So payment history, things like, if you had bankruptcy, probably. So payment history could also be paying rent. If you're paying. So what does payment history mean? It means, do you pay off your credit card? Do you pay the minimum? Do you some cases where you don't pay the minimum amount? They're going to have all that information to come up with a credit score. And the higher your credit score, ultimately, the more likely are you to get a loan. And if you do get a loan, you're more likely to get a lower interest rate. And I think the highest credit score is 850. That's the maximum. And I don't know what the minimum is. I'm sure there's some minimum. It has to be 0 is at least a minimum, but there's some minimum. So, again, from personal experience, one thing you could do is you could open up a checking account. Okay, a checking account, you're putting the money in, right? So the bank's not taking not that much of a risk in doing that. And then with the checking account, you can write checks. So if you don't bounce the checks, you can get a debit card. If you don't bounce, you don't do the same thing with a debit card. So those are probably the easiest ways to, without renting something or buying something, is to set up a savings account or checking account and use your debit card, but don't overdraft it. Okay. The next thing is getting a credit card. And you're like, well, can I just use cash or can I use a debit card? And the answer is, well, you could, but by using a credit card, you are establishing a record of credit. So with our daughters, we were able to get a credit card for them. I think they had like a $500 credit limit on it. So if you're a new credit card person, they may limit, you won't have $15,000, I can guarantee you that. They'll have some lower amount. And so you use it, and then you pay it off without a balance going forward. And so after a couple months or a year of using a credit card responsibly and paying it off, then that's going to influence your credit score. So that's, for one thing, is they might allow you to increase um, your your credit limit, for one thing. But most likely, all this. Then if you go to buy a car after that, then you'll have some credit history, and that's probably the next thing you'll do. So don't wait till you buy a car to get a credit card, but don't get a credit card unless you think you're going to pay it off, because you kind of have to plan. Because once your credit score gets zapped for whatever reason, it's hard to rebuild that credit record. So it's so that's again, it's not really my personal advice. I think it's those are the things that you should do. And for example, when my older daughter, went to New York City, they wanted to rent an apartment in Manhattan, and there you actually have to have proof that you can pay for the apartment. Okay, do you have enough income to prove that you can pay $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment? So they got there, and actually they went like a job hunting trip or visit. And my daughter didn't have a job yet. My son-in-law did have a job, but his salary by itself wouldn't pay for an apartment. He wouldn't have enough money for an apartment. So they did a credit. The renting company, people that were renting the apartment, did a credit check on Jennifer and Zach, and they also said you've got to find somebody who'll co-sign for your rent, not just for your car payment. A lot of times you have people who will co-sign for your car payment because you don't have any credit record. I had to send them my tax return. I had to send them how much money we had in the bank. They checked my credit report, and ultimately they said, okay, yeah, you're fine. And then she got a job, and then everything was fine. But there was that initial thing, just to get an apartment, she had to show some kind of record of responsible financial stewardship. And now she's, she doesn't need me anymore for that, at least for that. And she's in good shape. But anyway, so those are just some basic things about a credit. My credit score is not as high. It's pretty good. It's between very good and exceptional, okay? But it's not 850. And the reason is because I haven't paid any payments for, we paid our house off 17 years ago, and we don't have any car loans. And so we just don't. If I to improve my credit score, I'd have to go out and take a loan. And if I took out a loan for a year and showed payments, I'm sure I could boost my credit score, but it doesn't really matter. It's because I don't need to. But okay, so that's it for today. I'll make sure I go and erase my credit information off the recording. I didn't see that earlier. I was like, oh my God.